One.
Recording has started.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the first public hearing. It'll be the first of two for the Center County and Bellefonte Borough CDBG programs. For the past several years, we hold combined public hearings as the county is the recipient of the CDBG funds intended for Bellefonte Borough, so they come into the county. We combine our hearings since we conduct these hearings within the borough limits of Bellefonte. And what's unique this time is we are actually going to be talking about two separate pots of funds. Our normal fiscal year 2020 CDBG funds, which Congress happened to approve last October before everything happened, and a new allocation of funds through the CARES Act, the CDBG-CV. Isn't my page going down? There we go. Chad, I'm going to ask you to quickly go through the ground rules as far as how we will be conducting the hearing and how residents or citizens can ask comments.
Yes, thank you, Matt. While Matt is presenting, I will place everyone in on mute. At a certain point, he'll get, I think he said around slide 19, where we'll open up for questions. If you have a question, please just submit a chat in the chat box that you have a question, and we will unmute you in the order that they are received.
And all comments, questions become part of the official public record for this for these funds, as well as they will when we conduct our second public hearing. If you have any difficulties, if you have to step off, if you have trouble hearing, getting through to us, you're more than welcome to submit comments directly to us. There's my email address, our phone number. We will officially hold the comment period open till the 21st of May, although I suspect we might be going a few days beyond that. But officially, our deadline is May 21st. Again, I want to introduce myself. My name is Matt Milliron. I'm a planner here in the Center County Planning Office. I've been administering the county's CDBG program for about the past 15 years. For about 10 years prior to that, I assisted the former director of the county CDBG program. Also with me today is a fellow staffer, Linda Marshall. Linda is actually taking the minutes of the meeting. As Chad said, this meeting is being recorded, but we will also then have minutes available upon request. And again, they're part of our public record. And Don Holderman is with us. As I mentioned, since we administer the borough's program, Don will be speaking about the funding as it relates specifically to the borough. Let's talk a minute about the background of CDBG. The Community Development Block Grant Funds, CDBG, are federal dollars that come to us from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Dr. Ben Carson is the current secretary. This program was created in the early 70s under President Nixon. It was a consolidation of several social programs that were in place at that time. The CDBG program in its present form dates back to 1984. These funds are available across the country. It originally was intended for large urban areas, but it was massaged. It was also then meant to assist the smaller rural communities. The large urban areas receive funds directly from HUD. These are known as direct federal entitlements. As an example, locally, State College Borough is a direct federal entitlement. They work directly through HUD. Non-urban areas work through their respective state agencies. And in Pennsylvania, that's the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development, or DCED. Fund administration and allocation is different in every state. Pennsylvania is very unique. Pennsylvania is the only state in the nation that allocates the funds as it does. Eligible projects must meet one of three national objectives. They are to benefit low to moderate income residents, LMI. I'll be throwing that term around quite a bit today. And in fact, 70% of the funds must be used to within that category to improve the lives of LMI residents. We can then use 30% of our funds either to address slum and blight or under the term critical or urgent need. And that's something that now has relevance. I can tell you since 1984, Center County has only ever funded one urgent need activity, and we have not done any of those in the past 15 years. But that might come into play now, because if this isn't a critical need, I don't know what is. Let's talk about the new CARES Act and the CV funding we're going to get. The CARES Act, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, was passed and signed at the end of March 27th. The act included $5 billion in emergency CDBG funding to be released in three portions. It's termed as CDBG-CV, CV for COVID. The act allows HUD to waive some long-standing programmatic rules. However, 4 were specifically accepted from being waived. And there were 2 that were specifically...
Recording is on.
2 were specifically directed in the act that they should be waived. They must be waived. And that is the ability to hold virtual hearings like we're doing right now instead of the in-person hearings. And we have the ability to shorten the comment period to 5 days. Center County Commissioners just took action this past Tuesday to temporarily adopt these 2 measures. Now, these measures only remain into place until the need for social distancing has been removed by local officials. Maybe it's possible till we get around to our second hearing, maybe in about 3 weeks, that we will actually have an open public meeting. To be determined yet. This work had to be done as far as an update to our citizen participation plan, which I had mentioned the commissioners had addressed on just this past Tuesday. In the first allocation of the CDBG funds, Pennsylvania was awarded $24 million. These funds were then redistributed across Pennsylvania according to PA Act 179 of 1984, as required. DCED must follow Act 179 when reallocating the funds. There are 50 non-federal entitlement counties in Pennsylvania, and 48 of those we all received the same amount, $166,152. 2 counties elected to opt out of the CB funds. Bellefonte Borough, as a state entitlement under Act 179, was allocated $66,574. There very well is probably going to be additional CV funds, COVID funds, available to us grantees from a statewide competitive pool at a later date. At this point, Center County, we do anticipate an application for these added CV funds. The use is very specific as far as this particular allocation of funds is concerned. The Act clearly states it must be used to prepare for, prevent, or respond to COVID. The county and the borough are allowed to deduct up to 18% of these funds to use towards the administration of the grant. These, as you can imagine, federal dollars have a lot of requirements with them. The county has not yet determined the amount that it might actually hold back for administration. There has been discussion about a lesser amount, which then allows more funds to hit the street to go out to benefit the residents. What is also unique, what was written in the Act, is since the 2020 funds were passed by Congress back in October as part of the budget, this Act went back and allowed that the 2020 funds can also now be used in response to COVID, and we'll be talking about that some more in a little bit. So what type of activities are we talking about that we could fund? Again, as I mentioned, how we must use the funds. typically, as grant administrators, if we want to fund public services, which we always could, we had a 15% limit on the amount of our grant that we could allocate to public services. That has been removed in the Act. That applies to the CV funds as our allocation that came in October. We need to document the benefit to the income eligible people. Generally, income eligibility is determined as 80% of the area median income. HUD also suggested that funds, we not only need to look at the immediate need, we also need to consider investing into the long-term solutions to the community needs as far as COVID. Also, we address any inequities to make sure the funds are hitting all economic classes equally. The types of general public services that we can fund, as an example, this comes right from the HUD guidance listed here: employment services, crime prevention, child care, services for homeless persons, welfare services, down payment assistance, recreational services. We're going to be looking at any activity that could include direct payments in, again, response to the COVID. We're considering direct payments to small businesses that have been impacted by the pandemic, assistance to healthcare facilities or providers, increased costs by food banks or the costs associated with the home delivered meals, payments to emergency services or municipal service providers, municipalities, child care providers, and the possibility of direct assistance to low-income LMI families that have been impacted by job loss. And this could include rent assistance or utility payments, which right now are currently limited to 3 months, but who knows how that might change. Any assistance to small businesses, we have to look at the employees of those businesses and the percentage of LMI within those businesses. Any activity that the county decides to fund, all activities are subject to scrutiny under the Stafford Act of 1988, basically intended to prevent any double dipping, that no one organization or activity is receiving payment twice from two different pots of federal funds. Applications could be received from local governments or authorities, nonprofit organizations, faith-based organizations, emergency service providers, healthcare providers, and the small businesses, as we discussed. Any incorporated organization, basically, that can show us they have the capacity or the staff, the ability to fulfill said activity selected for funding. The first thing the county needs to do, and again, on behalf of Bellefonte, we are doing a needs assessment. We want to try to identify what are the overall needs across all areas of the county. This needs assessment, we want to look at healthcare, emergency services, local government, businesses, housing. If we intend to go after additional CV funds, we need to demonstrate to DCED that we have looked at all potential needs across the county. Requests and comments that come from this hearing, again, become part of the record, become part of that local needs assessment. As I mentioned, we're going to accept comments at least up till the 21st of May, or until, beyond that, until HUD releases the final guidance. We have heard that we might see that final guidance from HUD by the end of next week, in the form that it has to come out in the Congressional Federal Record. I would then expect that, the commissioners might have a draft funding decision, maybe into early June. We would then have a second public hearing, possibly the 3rd or even into the 4th week of June. Again, we're required to have 2 hearings. At that second hearing, the intended funding plan would be announced to the public. Again, open for comments. We would close the second hearing maybe around the 25th, and hopefully get our application into the state by the end of June. The sooner we get our application in, obviously, the sooner we can get our funds. DCD has set up that all applications must be in by July 31st. We hope to get ahead of that deadline. Here's our contact information. Anybody wanting to make an official request to the county, this is where you would submit it to. Obviously, we're open for questions. We would urge you to call in ahead of time. We will help you formulate any type of request for funds. That's our job in here, get something together. What we do then is we put it before the commissioners for them to make their final decision. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Chad, and we are now going to be open to accept any comments or questions from the public. So Chad, please go ahead.
Yes, Matt, our Michael Pipe would like to make a comment.
Thank you, Chad. And I want to say a big thanks to Matt for the work that he's done to put together this information for the CDBG, specifically on COVID. We typically see Matt many times a year coming into our commissioners' meetings for recommendations for water projects, sewer projects, and infrastructure projects through CDBG that really improve the quality of life for residents across Center County. And Matt's done a perfect job in that, and he knows quite a bit about the CDBG program and projects. So we want to give a big thanks for all the work that he's doing in order to get this special allocation of money up and running. I do want to recognize, however, that we as the Board of Commissioners are going to be relying on the advice for this particular allocation of funds really heavily on our Human Services Administrator, Natalie Corman, and a lot of our Human Service Department heads that are working tirelessly to try to fill gaps in services as we confront this pandemic. So while Matt is going to be doing a lot of the consolidation and collection of data, we're really going to be relying heavily on Natalie Corman and her team to be able to showcase the need that's out there. And just from a general sense, the federal government was in a bind with how do they get money out to communities as quickly as possible while still not reinventing the wheel. Last thing they would want to do is to create something that has 6 sides and doesn't roll. So they went with the CDBG program. I will say the CDBG program, as Matt can attest, is sometimes a complicated program in terms of all of the requirements that are needed with it, but it probably was the best option the federal government had to get money out to counties across the country. And again, billions of dollars are flowing out, and so we appreciate that. So I just want to again thank Matt for the work that he's doing. It's just something over and above the work that he does for the CDBG program that focuses on infrastructure, and really do want to recognize our human services staff for all the work that they're going to be doing to compile the information and make recommendations back to us. So with that, I'm really looking forward to, on behalf of Commissioner Higgins and Commissioner Gershom, all three of us really are interested in hearing the comments that our community has and hearing them as we go forward into the next week.
Matt, I don't see any other comments at this time. If anyone has a comment, if you could please write it in the chat and I can unmute you.
Well, Chad, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, if nothing else, we will continue to move forward. Again, there's the information. Comments can gladly come in after the close of this hearing up until the 21st, and as I said, possibly even beyond that. Bellefonte Borough. I'm going to ask Don if he has anything that he wants to add. As I mentioned, Bellefonte Borough is going to get $66,574, and the funds that the borough receives are meant to only benefit borough residents, no different than the funds that State College Borough receives directly from the federal government are intended strictly for use within the State College Borough limits. So, Don, do you have anything that you wish to add?
Matt, I just wanted to first thank you for putting together the presentation. I think, this is excellent thus far on the COVID program. As far as Bellefonte Borough is concerned, right now, in working with you and talking to Borough Council, we're kind of looking at the utility payments such as electric, water, sewer payments, and things like that for families that are unable to pay with the $66,000 plus that we have for the program. We are, however, still, again, as you said, soliciting any comments from the public on uses of these funds as well. So, again, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Don. And at this time, we will pause if there are any questions related to Bellefonte Borough's allocation of funds or their intended use, or questions for Don or myself on the borough's CDBG-CV program.
Yes, Matt, we have one. We have a comment, a request from Joanne. I will unmute her right now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I got a phone call this morning from the local president of Nittany Now, it's the local chapter of the National Organization for Women. She said that she was going to try to be on the call, but because of her duties at the Center Safe, she might not be able. Apparently, she's not here, so I was wondering if I could read what her email said.
Joanne, if you can hear me, what I would like to add is that I did receive an email this morning from them, and it was added to the CV file as part of the public comments.
This is not from Center Safe. This is from her representing the local chapter of NAP.
Okay.
What she said, she wanted to make the following recommendations: an outreach and information to immigrant communities and color all over the county, not just in State College, about medical basic needs and financial resources, access to free testing for residents and medication assistance if positive, continued access to mental health, substance abuse, and reproductive health services throughout the county, outreach on domestic and sexual violence services in the county, and ensuring survivors have financial and medication resources in addition to understanding their legal rights during this pandemic. And she assumes that this would come from both Bellefonte Police, State Police, and Center Safe, and the other police services in the county. And then financial help with utilities through June to avoid shutoffs of water and electricity, also helping with the internet necessary for many people working from telemedicine at this time. It could mean working with internet providers to help individually through the agency. That's it.
Thank you, Joanne. And that does sound like the exact same message that she had emailed to me this morning.
Okay.
That I had added. So there'd be no need for you to forward it.
Okay. Thanks.
And what I'll do is I'll forward you the response I sent to her.
Okay. Appreciate it.
Sure. Chad, any other hands raised for comments? The Bellefonte program.
No additional requests at this time.
Okay, thank you. Then we're going to move ahead with the actual second part of our hearing today. This first part dealt with the COVID, the CV funds. Now we're going to discuss both Center County and Bellefonte Borough's allocation of 2020 CDBG entitlement funds, sometimes called CDBG-E. All right. We'll talk about the funds available, the typical type of activities that we fund, and what the application schedule will be for those funds. It's going to be different than the CV funds. I'm going to enjoy the fact that I have to submit 2 applications, possibly 3 this year. So with our 2020 entitlement funds, the allocation memo came out a couple of weeks ago. Center County is to receive $351,058 in the 2020 funds. We expect $287,958 to go to projects, and we will set back the 18%, $63,100 for program administration. Bellefonte Borough was allocated $115,190 using the same 18% program admin set aside. That would leave $94,409 for projects, putting $20,700 into their admin. I will note this allocation is approximately about a 4% increase over our 2019 allocation. Again, there's 3 categories of national objectives that we must adhere to, going back to the benefiting LMI persons, address slum and blight, or critical or urgent need. And I think I mentioned this previously. What was done in the CARES Act is Congress went back and put the CARES Act funding requirements onto the 2020 allocation that was released in October. So that's why we're able to hold a virtual hearing for these 2020 funds, have the 5-day comment period. And if decision makers would like to do this, they could put all of their 2020 allocation into those same types of activities as we previously mentioned to address human service needs. Or they could put a portion of it. They could put half or 25% or whatever. We have some flexibility there as to how we would want to allocate these funds. Historically, Center County and Bellefonte Borough has spent 100% of our CDBG funds serving that LMI criteria, serving the LMI persons in the county and in the borough. How do we determine eligibility? Well, we use census data. We use what's called the American Community Survey, releases LMI data in roughly every 5 years. We had a new release that was done in March of last year that was based on the 2011 to 2015 ACS census data. And on the board there is a list of the boroughs, townships, or villages. A CDP is a census designated place, in essence what we call our villages, that have been determined by census to already be eligible based on the LMI population in those areas. So doing any project in those communities, and for an example, I'm going to look at the bottom of the list, look at Woodward. They have an LMI rate of 81.2%. Last year, the commissioners selected Woodward for funding for a new water well for the village. Obviously, everybody in the village benefits from that new water well, thus it has area-wide benefit, and so the eligibility applied. Without this information, we then have to do surveys of the communities or the portion of the community. Again, the benefit area is what we have to determine if 51% of the folks that live in that benefit area would meet the LMI criteria. We also don't just look at the LMI numbers. There are 8 categories of presumed benefit groups that we can allot funds to, as well as doing direct benefit activities. The direct benefits, we must do income intakes on the individuals because they are receiving the funding directly. A map of Center County, and then you can see Bellefonte Borough in the top right corner. We show the census tracts or block groups, or those CDPs. It's either yellow or it's shown in the reddish brown, the areas of Center County that are determined eligible by census. Our application schedule. Right now, the county's application must be submitted by October 28th, which is about approximately a month earlier than what it was last year. Maybe with this, with the pandemic issues, DCD has discussed that we could, if needed, we could go beyond October 28th, if given them previous notification. Prior to the submission, we will need to hold a second public hearing. We have to hold it at least 2 weeks prior to when we submit the application to give the public time to comment on what the county's intended use is. And of course, everything I'm talking about now also applies to the borough's funds. Once we submit the application, as a general rule of thumb, it takes us about 4 months. Then we actually get our contract in hand. For an example, we submitted in November of last year, and I think Commissioner Pipe just the contract just came to Commissioner Pipe early last week that he was able to sign it. So probably in about a week or two, we should have our 2019 contract in hand. What have the county and the borough funded over the past 3 years? 2017, Center County funded a water transmission main replacement project in Millheim Borough because at the time of the allocation, Millheim Borough was eligible. They are now no longer eligible under the recent census release, but they were at that time. $231,700. That was a multi-year funded project that also included some funds from 2016. Bellefonte Borough did we're doing some handicap access barrier removal at both Governor's Park and Missoula Park. The Missoula Park activity is finished. It's really nice. We put in a fishing pier for handicap mobility issues. That was a barrier we needed to remove. And at Governor's Park, we're addressing some issues with the one restroom to make it available to handicapped residents. 2018, Center County funded a project in Unionville Borough to install a new 100,000-gallon water storage tank to replace tanks that date back to the 1920s. Status of that project is the engineer is now preparing the bid documents, looking to go to bid possibly in about a month. Bellefonte Borough allocated their funds to be used towards constructing a pedestrian bridge that will be attached to that existing railroad bridge in Talleyrand Park. Folks may have noticed that we did some improvements in front of the train station last year. This is just a continuation on that project. 2019, as mentioned previously, we're funding a water well development project in the village of Woodward, and Bellefonte Borough is also using their 2019 funds on that bridge project. The status of that bridge project is we just opened the bids last week. I expect we opened them last Monday. The borough approved a conditional award to a contractor out of the Williamsport area, and I expect that award to go through pretty soon, and expect the contractor hopefully to start work within about 3 weeks on that project. Center County traditionally, with our CDBG funds, we fund infrastructure project. Early on, we've done some housing rehab. We had funded a few public service projects way back at the inception of the program in the 80s into the very early 90s. A few street improvement projects, but by and large, the community tells the commissioners how they want the funding to be allocated, and infrastructure by far has been the need as far as water and sewer across the county since 1994. What this chart does not show is, in addition to the funds that the county receives every year as are part of our entitlement allocation, we have also applied for and received, we're probably in the $12 million range of extra CDBG funds, the competitive CDBG funding. Prior to 1994, the county had not ever received a competitive allocation. But since '94, we're probably on about our 15th competitive allocations that the county has received. The last one being a big sewer project. We received almost $1 million for that sewer project down in the village, Potter's Mills. And there you can see the allocations, how the funds have been distributed since 1984, pretty broadly across the county. And again, the funding must be used if doing an area-wide benefit project, areas that are determined to be low to moderate income. The projects that we have under consideration at this point, again, we're going to be looking at additional COVID needs, the pandemic needs, as we look at these 2020 funds. A lot of things we have to consider. What are the environmental impacts? We have to do environmental studies on our activities. We have to review with the Pennsylvania State Historical Commission. The projects that we have on our list that we've been carrying forward, we've had requests in the mountaintop region for various water main replacements. Taylor Township, the Oak Ridge Water Authority has discussed funding with us. Village of Coburn and Penn Township, water main improvements. Unionville Borough, we are looking at a water well development project with them. Hoggs Township, they've talked for several years about replacement of water mains in Runville and extension of water service up into up Moose Run Road, up Thomas Hill. We're working with Aaronsburg right at the very moment. We're doing an income survey down there to determine eligibility. They need to reconstruct their existing water treatment plant, also looking at some water line replacement. The Mid-State Literacy Council has talked to us in the past about increasing some outreach for illiterate adults. The Eagle Creek community located in Union Township, we've been discussing a possible water system, sewer system interconnection with Unionville Borough. Rush Township has recently been in touch with us as far as some demolition of various blighted properties across the township. That would fall under that slum and blight national objective that I discussed earlier. A lot of small villages, the CDPs around the county, do not have existing wastewater treatment, such as Aaronsburg, Reversburg, Orviston, Monument, Casanova. We just have these at the back of we put them in our 3-year development plan every year so that in case something should come up, if a funding opportunity arrives, or if regulators start to address that issue with the local municipality, we can say that we've been aware of it, it's been on our list, and it makes it much easier to bring in funding for these communities if we keep them on this list. When we look at selecting projects, again, we have to spend at least 70% of our funds on LMI benefit. And, we have previously been limited to 15% that we can spend on public services. And obviously that's been waived for this year. We do look at the severity of the problem in a community. What's the percentage of LMI households? What other funds are available or being used towards a project? And what is the community's ability to complete? What's their viability? We just can't give them funding and then hold their hand the entire way through it. The community has to step up and help move the project forward. Bellefonte Borough, Don, I don't know if you're still on the line.
Yeah, I'm here, Matt.
If you want to talk briefly about what the borough is considering for your use of funds.
I can do that. Currently, what we are looking at for with the 2020 funds is to do some, under the objective of LMI, to do some work on West Bishop Street and South Spring Street, kind of a streetscape, some streetscape work to make that intersection around the Dollar General and Smokers Express and the municipal lot a little more safe. We have loading zones there with big trucks parked at Dollar General in the morning, up over the sidewalk. We have people coming in and out of different areas where Smokers Express is. It's been a hazardous area for some time, brought to the attention of council, something that we're we had an engineer look at earlier in the year, and we're looking to kind of address that and clean that area up a little bit, make it a little more safe for the pedestrians that live in that area.
Thank you, Don. At one time, you and I had kicked around the idea that the borough might consider looking at a program to help address maybe some older sewer laterals, address some of the I&I problem, which I understand really is not that much of a problem within Bellefonte Borough, and that could be a potential project in the future.
Absolutely, that is still on our radar as something that we want we want to look at. And once again, Matt, thanks again for taking the ball, and it's been a pleasure working with you on all these projects the last couple of years. And when we get this pedestrian bridge walkway completed, it's going to be something that we at the borough have been wanting for some time. So we're really excited about this particular project.
Don, that is going to be a nice project down there in Talleyrand Park. You mentioned to me something the other day, the original concept or the discussion with these improvements in Talleyrand Park goes back to when?
There was a master plan done in Talleyrand back in the 1990s, and that's when they had this design, or at least came up with this thought of having a pedestrian walkway. We've tried many years to get it here. A couple of years ago when we had CDBG funds with our last project, with the expansion of the platform extension and the other safety features that we did around the playground this past summer, we wanted to do it all at once, but that was at the point where steel prices were fluctuating significantly, and our bids came in way too high. So we ended up, with Matt's help, de-scoping the project, working with our engineer, coming up with a redesign, and then putting it back out for bid. And fortunately, the bids came in, and we did have one bid that came in within the price range. That we were fortunate. We had 5 bids, but we had one bid that came in the price point that we were looking for. So very happy about that.
Well, that's good. It's only taken us 25 years to get to this point.
No one ever said government works fast.
So, Chad, once again, I'm going to turn it over to you as a moderator. If there are any comments, concerns, or questions, specifically now to our 2020 allocation of funds, any ideas of how the public would like to see those funds used, should the commissioners stay in their traditional, stay on the traditional road of funding infrastructure? Do we think we're going to need some of the funds to address COVID? We would like to hear your comments at this time.
Matt, I do have one request from Joanne for a comment or a question.
What you said. I just wanted to clarify what you said about the general CDBG funds, and that there was the waiver so that you could do more than 15% on the other 2 options. Does that mean that if the county comes up with an idea that they want to do 50% for COVID, they could do that, or is the 70% still have to go into the regular bucket?
Yeah, that's a good question, Joanne, and let me clarify that. And I can clarify it more in that I had a discussion with Mary Jane Smith at DCED yesterday, and she kind of gave me a little update. We always have to spend 70% of our funds to assist LMI residents. So that 15% actually came under that 70%. So if you had $100,000, $70,000 must be used for LMI. Then out of that $70,000, you could only spend 15% on the public services. But now at this time, they took away that cap. We can use all of our funding for public services. Going back to that 100,000, we can spend all 100,000 on public services, but the public services must benefit low moderate income residents. So yeah, the 15 and 70 can get a little confusing. Bottom line is 70% must be used for LMI residents, and of that, in the past, only 15% could be used for public services. But again, that's been waived on our 2020 money and obviously on the CV money. So Bellefonte Borough, in your case, you could spend all of your funding on CV-related services.
Thank you.
I hope that made it clear as mud. Any other questions, Chad?
I do not see any other requests for questions at this time.
Well, I want to thank everybody for attending. I know we ran through it rather quickly, but I respect everyone's time with this. There's our contact information. We're going to be here for comments or questions over the next several days. Any specific requests for funding, gladly contact us. We'll help you put that together, make sure that it gets in front of the commissioners or in front of the Bellefonte Borough Council, as appropriate, for their consideration. All requests go on into the pile. They go on the table for decisions then to be made. And as Commissioner Pipe had said, it's a collaborative effort. Commissioners obviously have the final say, planning staff, and in case of the public services, our human services staff under Natalie Corman will be working closely with them to help us steer the funding to where it's most needed. Thank everyone for attending. I'm going to leave the screen up here for a few minutes. Look forward to hearing from people.